First of all, on behalf of the district, particularly its Board of Education Administration, I want to welcome you here. And I want to introduce those who will be speaking to you this evening. I'll ask them to stand and remain standing until they've all been recognized. First will be Wade Lucas, Superintendent of the Olentangy Local Schools. Gail Marsh, the Executive Director for Human Resources and Operations here at Olentangy Local. Russ Martin, the Delaware County Sheriff. Steve Hedge, the Executive Director of the Delaware Morrow Mental Health and Recovery Service Board. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening and for sharing. Also want to pay a special thanks to the Olentangy Rotary for helping host the event this evening as part of their Peace Through Service campaign. And I'm going to introduce them also and ask them to wave or stand or make themselves available to you. They include President Dan Weng, Sue Jones, Lisa Flannery, Wade Jenkins, Steve Ussery, Dan Ludwig, Al Valco, Jan Simonis, and John Medeiros. So again, thank you to the Rotary Club. And particularly thanks for their Peace Through Service campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, our format this evening is going to be very similar to those that we have used in previous community forums. Our speakers will present. We will have index cards available to you, and hopefully we can pass those out as we begin our presentations this evening if you don't already have one. What we want you to do is on those cards or a piece of paper, please write any questions that you may have during the course of the presentations. The members of the Rotary Club will gather those and bring them forward, and hopefully then we'll have time to address your questions. Our topic this evening is very timely. Obviously, we're very familiar with the events that began with the Columbine shootings in Colorado many years ago, but it's also touched closer to home in Chardon, Ohio. And I think it's more appropriate not to talk about the Chardon shootings as it is to talk about the Chardon killings, because certainly that was the motivating factor behind that particular incident. Followed then, of course, by the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut. Just in order to place all of this in perspective, shortly after the Chardon killings, the Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine convened a special task force. The task force included people from mental health, it included law enforcement agencies, it included fire safety individuals, it included school people, and the task force has continued its work ever since that time, taking a look specifically at those kinds of plans that districts have in place and how they might be enhanced in order to assist first responders to any kind of an incident. But as that has gone on, we've had other things that have occurred. State Representative Tracy Hurd from the Central Ohio District has also convened a task force. They're continuing to meet, and part of their discussion lately has involved school resource officers. The President of the Senate, Keith Faber, has merged the Senate Education and local government committees into a special committee which has been meeting weekly in order to discuss the whole issue of school safety. In addition, within the last 2 weeks, we have had introduced by Senator Gail Manning Senate Bill 42, which would allow school districts for the first time to designate a special levy, small levy, on the ballot that could be used only for school safety purposes. In the governor's budget, he has proposed a $12 million appropriation through the Ohio School Facilities Commission to enhance architectural changes and structural changes to school buildings in order to improve safety. Our public officials are looking at this incident and these incidents and the situation very carefully. And I personally am looking forward to the comments that will be offered this evening by our guest presenters. And so at this time, I would like to introduce your superintendent of the Olentangy Local Schools, Dr. Wade Lucas.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome, everyone. It's very nice to see you here, and I am looking forward to the next 2 hours of conversation regarding this safety topic. First and foremost, before we get started, I'd like to thank Tom Ash. Tom serves as the Legislative Director for the Buckeye Association of School Administrators. He's become somewhat of our resident facilitator for our community forums. If you've been to more than one, you know that he's been here and he does a fantastic job. And obviously we enjoy having him back. So Tom, thank you so much for that. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Also, I'd like to thank the fellow panelists that we have here this evening. We're extremely fortunate to have the collaboration that we have here in not only Olentangy local schools, but the entire county of Delaware, and we're very appreciative of the individuals for taking the time. We all know that this is a very, very busy time of year, and there are a lot of things going on, but we do thank those individuals specifically for two things. One, for taking part in this event, and number two, probably more importantly, is for their partnership and making Olentangy schools a safe, positive learning environment. Tom already alluded to these individuals, but I also want to give a special thanks to the Rotary members, of which I'm a member. As you know, if I didn't recognize them, they would probably kick me out of the club, so therefore I wanted to make sure we gave them a special thanks for being here this evening and doing their part for the community. Last but not least, I'd like to thank the audience for attending. As we all know, this is a very uncomfortable topic, but it's a necessary discussion that we must have. We are not here tonight to scare anyone. We are here tonight to recognize and confront reality. I drove through Newtown, Connecticut approximately 3 weeks ago, and one thing that struck me about Newtown, Connecticut was the fact that it could be Olentangy very, very easily. An affluent school district, well taken care of, and I really didn't see a whole lot of difference in what was there and what is here. This issue, as we know, has many variables involved, but much of the discussion has been focusing on basically two things. One, of course, is gun control, and I like to say that's the sexy part of the whole piece, and the fact that gun control is very politicized, whether you're for, whether you're against. I think another thing that we need to focus on would be the mental illness issue, and that's the part that we deal with on a daily basis, and we're, again, very fortunate to have Steve here to address that piece. Unfortunately, as Tom said, trends have been discovered. Most of what you hear tonight is the most recent, up-to-date information from the individuals that deal with these issues on a daily basis. So we're very, very fortunate to have those individuals here. So before I introduce our first speaker, I also want to recognize four individuals, I believe four, here this evening, board members. And if you would, I would ask that you stand. First and foremost, we have board member Dave King. We have board member Julie Wagner-Fiesel. We have board vice president Stacy Dunbar. And we have board president Kevin O'Brien. And if you would, please give those individuals a round of applause. Thank you for being here, all four of you. Next, I want to introduce the individual who's going to kick this off tonight, our Executive Director of Human Resources and Operations, Mr. Gail Marsh. And as Gail is making his way up, I just want to say a few things about this individual. He has gone above and beyond the call of duty in regard to this safety issue. Very appreciative of the time that he has taken, not only to go to trainings for us, but also to bring that information back and really drive this whole piece of school safety. So without further ado, I introduce to you Mr. Gail Marsh.
All right, good evening. I'd like to say welcome and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about extremely important topic, school safety. This topic is important for many reasons, but it's driven home because in addition to being the Executive Director of Operations and Human Resources for Olentangy, I'm a father, and I have a little girl, a first grader, here in the district. So The recent events have an impact both on a professional level and a personal level. So this is a very important topic. What I wanted to do tonight briefly is share with you some of the things, some of the activities that take place in Olentangy local schools to keep your kids safe, some of which you're very aware of, some of which you may not be aware of. So share with you the things that are already in place, ongoing, to keep kids safe. And then take a few minutes to talk about some of the new things, some of the initiatives that we have underway to enhance the safety of the school system. So with that, I'll just dive right in. Jennifer Eisman works very closely with me. Her title is the Coordinator of Safety, Wellness, and Workers' Compensation in the district. And Jennifer works very closely with myself and Dr. Lucas to ensure the safety. She really is responsible for coordinating the safety program in her district. And I'm not sure if folks realize that we have someone that a big chunk of their job is dedicated to this each and every day. So Jennifer Eisman, would you stand up and please? Some of the activities, and just some of the things that Jennifer does on a daily basis, she's responsible for coordinating all the district safety plans, all the building safety plans, and ensuring that those safety plans are on file with the Attorney General and all law enforcement agencies. She's also in charge of our district safety committee that meets regularly and brainstorms ways that we can improve safety within the district. One of the things that she does on a bi-weekly basis is meets with our school resource officers. We have 3 school resource officers in a partnership with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department. So she has bi-weekly meetings with them to discuss what's happening in the district, what's happening in our community, and what can we do with our school resource program to become more safe. Additionally, on a regular basis, she does routine, regular safety checks on all of our buildings. Anything from walking the halls to walking the perimeter of the buildings to ensure that the doors are locked when they're supposed to be locked, that the safety procedures in the buildings are being followed, and where she finds things that need to be improved, she works directly with the building principals to share those opportunities and make sure that we're doing the things that we say we're supposed to do with regard to safety. So those regular building safety checks are vital. In addition to that, she often is involved in hitting committees when there's a particular safety topic at hand. For instance, last year, for a big chunk of the year, she was responsible for organizing a committee made up of administrators, teachers, and community members to ensure that our elementary parent volunteers went through a background check, because FBI, BCI background check. That's not something that happened in the past for our elementary parent volunteers, and there were lots of opinions of how that program should be run. And I'm happy to say that that program is in place and our kids are safer for it. In addition, recently, another routine type of responsibility is coordinating, working with our townships regarding a grant on safe routes to school. How can we obtain potentially flashing lights at some of our buildings? So you can see she's busy with safety in addition to lots of her other duties. So we have someone dedicated to this topic. In addition to that, of course, throughout the district, all of our buildings take part in regular safety drills, fire drills, tornado drills, lockdown drills, and each building has a school emergency response team that reviews those drills and how can they improve them, what problems or concerns they may have, and how they improve safety. I guess another big piece of safety within our district, one of the most important, is our relationship and partnership with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department. As I mentioned earlier, we have 3 full-time school resource officers that are in our buildings each and every day. And to me, there's nothing that gives me more peace of mind that know that those officers are here each and every day. They are their home base, I should say, is at the 3 high schools within the district. They often visit our middle schools and elementary schools for certain particular programs that they are involved in, or as an as-needed basis. And they are involved in every step of the safety planning that we talked about earlier in coordination with Jennifer Eisman. You may also be aware, it started several years ago, but in coordination with law enforcement, we do routine unannounced. We have drug sweeps from some of the K-9 units at our high schools and middle schools. And back to the school resource officers, we are in discussions and having discussions with Sheriff Martin about the very real possibility in the near future adding additional school resource officers. So that's something that we're in discussions with the Sheriff's Office about. Just a few other things that are currently in place and ongoing to to keep our kids safe. We do have a safety helpline, student helpline, that if someone wants to make an anonymous tip to the district about something they're concerned about with regard to safety, you can do that 2 different ways. Go online to the district website, click on the school building, and you'll see an icon to make an online report, or you can make a report. There's a phone number there that you can make a verbal report, and those reports go directly to the superintendent's office and are dealt with immediately. And I can tell you that because I know Mr. Rafe is one of those individuals that routinely deals with those reports when they come in, whether that be 3 o'clock in the morning or in the middle of the school day. Those are dealt with, and again, trying to keep kids safe through that safety helpline. Okay, I'll take a breath here and talk about some of the new safety measures or new programs that we're looking at or in process of putting in place, again, to enhance the safety of Olentangy local schools. Of course, due to recent events, and certainly after the Newtown tragedy, it makes us all take a step back and review what are we doing with safety and what can we do more to keep our kids safe. And through that process, each of our building principals has taken another look at their safety plans, their safety procedures that they operate on a daily basis, and tried to think about how can we improve those. Some of those improvements that they've made, the building principals, you may see. You may hopefully see increased stop. If you don't have a badge and you're walking through the building, someone may stop you and ask you, can I help you? I don't see that you have a badge on. Some of the procedures for entering the building and exiting the building, you may notice that those have been enhanced. There's probably some other safety procedures that have been enhanced that you will not be aware of, and that's intentional. That's part of our school safety program, so we're not always going to share all the things that we're doing with regard to safety because we don't want the bad guys to know that. In line with that, we have made some technology upgrades that are related to safety just recently in just about all of our buildings. But again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail about those because that's part of the school safety program. Okay. Recently, we had a company come to us. The name of the company is Armada. It's a safety, security, and planning company. And this company volunteered their professional services to provide detailed threat assessments on each level of our building, our high schools, middle schools, and elementaries. This is what this company does 24 hours a day. So having an outside company come in, walk with Jennifer each of our buildings during the day, and provide what they call a detailed threat assessment, and it is comprehensive. Part of this analysis also included a survey to all of our employees, asking them how can we enhance our safety procedures. Once that assessment is completed, we'll certainly share that and work with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department, our administrators, and look at that report and see what can we do better. Because while I feel our students are safe, we always need to be looking about how can we do a better job. Also, recently the board approved a product, service, Navigate. You may have seen that in the board minutes, but this program that the district purchased, the goal is to provide first responders. Heaven forbid we did have a safety event at one of our schools. We want our first responders and law enforcement, even on the way to the school to respond to an event, to have real time in the cruiser, have access to our school plans, the facilities, so they know exactly what the layout of the facility, and this program will give us the potential in the future to even have potentially real-time video from inside the building as they're approaching the building, because seconds count. Just a few more things and then I'll turn it over to Sheriff Martin. Dr. Lucas mentioned that I've attended several trainings recently. One of those is provided by the Attorney General, the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy, and unfortunately the topic of that training was active shooter training. And I can tell you it was not a pleasant training to be a part of. It reviewed many of the school shootings. We talked about Virginia Tech. We talked about Columbine. We talked about Chardon. We talked about Newtown. And what were some of the similarities? What are some of the things that potentially school systems can do to prevent that type of tragedy? I attended on behalf of the district. That same training is going to be brought by the Attorney General and the Ohio Peace Officers Training Academy on May the 7th for all administrators in the district, all principals, all supervisors, all administrators. That training will be taped, and that training will then go out to all of our employees. So they'll have that training. Now, I can tell you that that's sort of a sit-down classroom type of training. The next evolution of that, and I think Sheriff Martin may mention it, is, and you may have heard this in the media, ALICE training. That's really the next step. And that all of our school resource officers, again, in our partnership, have now been trained. And we're also going to have a few of our administrators trained in ALICE training, and then that will be rolled out to our staff to hopefully provide another layer of protection for our staff. A couple key points from the training that I attended and the ALICE training. I can tell you what I took away from that is collaboration is key. We need to collaborate with you as parents. If you are aware of information that pertain to safety in the schools, our teachers need to collaborate and share information. Our staff members need to share information, and we need to coordinate and share information with law enforcement, working together to avoid incidents like we've seen. One other thing from that training is schools, I think by and large, are very good and understand the lockdown, what needs to happen if there's a lockdown in the building. However, we need to add to that and make sure our staff members have the ability to make decisions in real time depending on the situation. So lockdown plus decision making. And then also the last thing that I took away from that training is, unfortunately, if one of these events happen, we need to be able to have an active response, not necessarily a passive response. And those are some of the things, some of the values that come out of that ALICE training that I talked about. But again, we'll be working with the Delaware County Sheriff's officers about how the best way to roll this out to our staff and protect our kids. With that, again, I would say that there's nothing more important than this to me for my Olentangy family and for my family itself. I thank you for the opportunity to share just some of the things we're doing to keep your kids safe. And with that, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Martin.
Just present from here, I guess. Okay.
Sure.
I'll present from here for just a couple minutes, and then I want to turn the floor over to your school resource officers and have them share with you, as Gail's already indicated, the ALICE program and what we think are some of the best practices out there right now. You know, I had the opportunity to share as a guest of Superintendent Lucas with your administrators recently, and I used the analogy that many of us vacation at the ocean. And a couple years ago, I was about waist deep in the water, and as I've done for probably 20 years, I had my adult daughter on one of those flotation devices, and she was just rolling over the waves, and I was kind of standing there. And as I looked left and right, I realized we were the only ones in the water. And that's kind of a weird feeling on a public beach, you know, and you realize there's nobody else out there. About that time, I heard the whistle blow, and I looked out, and about 12 or 15 feet from me was about a 4-foot shark. I began to back out of the water, obviously, while watching the shark the whole time, made a point not to panic. And by the time we got about ankle deep, my daughter realized something was up, and she looked over and saw the fin. She fell off the raft and screamed and ran the rest of the way, the rest of the 2 feet up onto the beach. Well, as I shared that with the staff, my next question was what I'd do 15 minutes later. Well, I went back into the ocean. And I share that with you because I think we need to put into perspective the reality that every day millions of our children attend schools across this country in very safe environments. So I think we have to capture that and put things into perspective. There's no doubt when these tragedies occur, and I will tell you, there seems to be an uptick in them as of late. And we need to be prepared for those things, but we need to do it based upon the best information. And I do think, it's something I've been advocating for recently, is that the decisions we make in protecting our staff, our community, and our students, they should be made at the local level. And you folks should be deciding how you allocate your dollars in making the environment as safe as possible. And it's my responsibility as a law enforcement executive and as your sheriff to give you the best advice that I can give you and partner with you in making those decisions. And that's the tack that I've taken, not only since I've been appointed and elected as sheriff, but it's the same position I took as the chief of police in the city of Delaware. And I will tell you, I have been, for a long time, a huge advocate of the School Resource Officer program. The program was introduced probably in the 70s, I think, in Detroit under completely different circumstances than our school resource officers are allocated now. And I want to confirm that well-trained, the right selected school resource officers actually become a part of the staff. And they gain the trust and respect of the staff. They develop relationships with the students. And as a result of that, then, your school resource officers can be an extension of the school, and we can do things in aspects of intervention. In a few minutes, one of my colleagues, Steve Hedge, is going to talk about mental health, and this is an aspect of this when we talk about intervention. But we can go out to people's homes, we can knock on their doors, we can interview family members, we can get consent to search to see if there's weapons in the home. And one of the things that we found in law enforcement is that when there's been successful intervention, and unfortunately the successful interventions often are not portrayed in the media as the tragedies are. And we don't have really good data on that. But when we've had successful interventions, it's because there's been a partnership between the schools, law enforcement, mental health, the families, the stakeholders, in reaching out to these families in crisis and these potential offenders in crisis. And we have to keep in mind, too, and unfortunately, it's a reality for us in law enforcement, and we've heard this several times, and I'll steal this from another law enforcement professional, but you know, we do live in an environment where there are sheep and there are wolves. And we see ourselves in law enforcement as sheepdogs. We're out there to protect the sheep. But having said that, I think in today's world, and that's part of the ongoing discussion in the media and in the public forum, is how do individuals protect themselves? Thus, which leads to that discussion on, people arming themselves. And again, that's something we can answer some questions on a little bit later. But I've been an advocate of Gavin DeBecker's work for many years, and if you've not read The Gift of Fear, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of that, and then he has a supplement to that called Protecting the Gift, which is addressed specifically to parents of children and how to protect your children in a very practical way without leading to a lot of a mindset of panic. And I'd like to be able to tell you that your law enforcement partners can protect you all the time, but I'd be lying to you if that was the case. And I think as a responsible law enforcement executive who is committed to working with our schools and our community, I'm also a taxpayer. And we have to be prudent in how we allocate your tax dollars. So as I've been asked to speak on this subject many times, what I've been sharing with people is there's a cost associated with protection. And the reality of it is, we can't protect you all the time. But we can, as we say in this business, harden the target. We can do some things that the general public generally can't do. And that's where I come full circle when I talk about your local law enforcement. In this particular case, your Delaware County Sheriff's Office. We want to be a part of those discussions with you, the stakeholders, in how safe we can make you. How much money do you want to spend to be a particular level of safety? And again, just having that open dialogue and a partnership. I want to introduce to you the 3 school resource officers that currently serve your district. Ron Vogel, who's seated over here. I've known Ron for probably, Ron, how long have you been at the Sheriff's Office?
15.
15 years. I've known Ron for 15 years. Despite working at the Delaware Police Department, we had a professional relationship, had a lot respect for Ron, that's only been magnified since I've now had the opportunity to work with him as a coworker. He's a consummate school resource officer, well-trained. He's vested, as I am, in this district, in that his wife works for you, and along with my wife. So I want this to be successful. I want your school to be successful. Ron also has children in the district. And one of the things I want to share with you is that you have 3 school resource officers assigned to your district. It is a financial partnership through Olentangy. We're grateful for that. But you see the many school buildings that Ron is responsible to kind of service. And it's an overwhelming task. They'll speak in a moment, but the relationships that they develop with the students goes far beyond just the hallways of the school. Lance Leonard is here tonight. I've inherited 3 outstanding school resource officers in this district. Lance is one of those. Both of these gentlemen were selected to serve in your district. And again, this slide displays the buildings that Lance is responsible for. And then lastly, Deputy Strasser is not with us tonight. He did work today, but he has a family member who's had some recent medical issues, and so he's home attending to that family member. So these 3 deputies are committed professionals. They're husbands, they're fathers. They're invested in this process. And the best school resource officers care about the communities they serve. And Olentangy's got 3 outstanding school resource officers. Their charge is to be proactive. I will tell you, as a law enforcement executive, I love having school resource officers in the building because, as I've been saying in a public forum for many years, there's no greater concentration of this demographic at one particular time during the day than in our schools. So why not have a law enforcement presence there to assist and serve them? Frankly, their service in the school allows our deputies to continue to answer calls on the street. They don't have to be taken off the roadway to come in to, whether it's a petty theft or a dispute in the hallways. These gentlemen generally can handle that stuff and free up your deputies to take care of the other calls for service. I want to turn over to both Ron and Lance just a couple minutes to talk about the ALICE training. Why don't you guys go up here and use the microphone, and then when you're done, we'll turn it over to Mr. Hedge. But they've both, well, actually all of our school resource officers recently completed this training, and they're prepared to kind of give you an overview of what we think is a best practice and what we're willing to partner with and share with our school district.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheriff. As the Sheriff said, you know, I have a vested interest as well. I have 4 boys that are in the district. I'm proud to live in this community. I'm proud of our school. I'm proud of the kids here in Olentangy. And, you know, and I told a group of juniors and seniors today, we were talking about internet safety and cyberbullying. I said, I look at all of you like you're my own kids. I mean, that's why I chose to be in the schools. Okay, this is where I want to be. I feel like I can make a huge impact. And your kids are my kids. And about a month ago, Sheriff Martin sent all the SROs to ALICE training. And we did a couple drills on the fly. And one of the drills, we started out, it was an active shooter situation. And we were training with airsoft guns. So they shoot out these little plastic pellets. And they sting if they hurt you. And the instructor told all the cops in the room, okay, we're going to go into the traditional lockdown that most schools across the country do. And the traditional lockdown in an active shooter situation is lock the door, you turn off the lights, the kids are in the corner, okay, being really quiet. So we started the scenario. So they got all of us cops, they had us sit down in the corner of the room, and they said, now I want you to listen because we got an air horn. And when you hear that air horn, those are shots being fired. So we're all sitting there and we're waiting, and all of a sudden we hear, and it was really far away. Then we heard 2 more shots. And it got closer and closer. And I could feel my anxiety starting to build, okay? And then all of a sudden, this shooter breached through the door of our classroom and started shooting all of us. And within 35 seconds, 25 out of 27 were hit. So then we did our second drill on the fly. And this one, the instructor said, this time, we're going to give you a couple minutes, okay, before the shooter comes in, and you guys do whatever. You throw things, try to barricade the door, whatever it takes. Well, the instructor kind of lied to us, and it was 30 seconds. So while we're talking, getting a game plan, all of a sudden, the shooter comes right through the door and starts shooting. It was chaos. People were running out of the door, throwing things. They did a swarming technique on the shooter. Okay, only 3 out of 27 got hit when we did it that way. The first scenario, the way a lot of schools are doing it in our country, 25 out of 27 were hit. The third scenario that we did was they picked the biggest guy, biggest cop in the group. He's probably 6'3", 300 pounds. They gave us a couple minutes. You're going into lockdown. You're going to barricade. And we were in a kindergarten room. And we took the desk, and we took the teacher's desk, and we slid it over to that door, and we barricaded that door. And that 300-pound man could not get in that classroom. Could not get in. And actually, when they were talking after we were debriefing after the scenario, I mean, he said, I was getting frustrated. I couldn't get into the door. And then the instructor said, well, did you notice those 2 other classrooms? Did you see all those people run out the building? And he said, no, I didn't even see them. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is kind of giving you a taste of what Alice is about. It's about giving our staff and our kids options. Giving them options. Because right now in our society, what we're teaching our teachers and our kids to do is nothing. And that's the worst thing that we can do. So, and basically Alice, in a nutshell, is teaching our staff and our kids how to survive. Sheriff said, law enforcement can't be everywhere at once all the time. Okay? Alice is about survival. From the time the first shot is fired to the time that law enforcement arrives on scene, which on average in the United States is about 5 to 6 minutes, which is a long time. So Alice is going to talk, is going to educate our teachers and our kids on what to do to survive in those critical minutes. So I am a firm believer in my heart that the best thing for our community, for our schools, for our kids, is to adopt this ALICE program. And Deputy Leonard is going to go over the acronym of ALICE and what each one stands for. Thank you.
Well, like Deputy Vogel said, we had an opportunity to go through some excellent ALICE training. It actually certified us to train staff and to train students in the schools or train other community members, whether it be at a library, hospital, any building where there could be a possible active shooter or active killer. To go over the acronyms, and most schools, like Deputy Vogel said, adopt a lockdown process. And the original lockdown process was actually created by prisons to gain control back over the inmates and over the prisons, to gain control and to gain control over the inmates and their activities. So the first one is to alert, and alert, what they would do is announce over the PA system there's an active threat or there's an active shooter or there's a threat in the building, and they would advise all students and all staff members to go into a lockdown. When we go into a lockdown, that means that all doors are closed and locked. The doors have a blind that goes over the window. All the schools or all the students will gather into the corner. The lights are turned off, and they sit quietly and basically wait for help to arrive or whatever options are available to them. Now, with that, we want to add options. Like Mr. Marsh said, the best thing to do in a natural instinct that we have is to either fight, to either run or flight, or to freeze. And unfortunately, what we're doing when we do a typical lockdown is we're teaching people to freeze, to stay down, stay under the desk, stay under the table, don't do anything, be quiet. And we want to give them options. And a lot of people's natural instinct is to, if I can get out of here, I'm going to run, I'm going to get to safety. If I can fight, if I can do something to stop this threat, I'm going to do that. Last thing that we want to do is teach people to freeze. So the next natural step in this would be to inform. And if there's an opportunity to be on the PA system or have somebody in the office alerting people to the shooters in the gym or the shooters in the commons or the shooters in the cafeteria or the shooters in the math hallway, that gives everybody in the building knowledge of where the threat is. And the idea after that would be to possibly evacuate. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But if there's an active threat and the shooter or the active killer would actually enter the room, we would instruct the teacher or students to use countermeasures. And I have a young daughter, and the instructor that we had said, what are little kids good at? They're good at yelling, throwing things, and running. And if they have that opportunity to run, we want to teach them to run. If they have an opportunity to throw things and to distract the person, do that and then run, yell, scream, do whatever you can. We want to create chaos for that person. We certainly don't want them to have that opportunity. And to speak on what Deputy Vogel said, I was actually the first shooter in the lockdown scenario, and it is an eerie feeling to have people sitting there not doing anything to a threat. So it was certainly an impactful training for me in that respect. And a lot of the pushback that people say is we don't want to teach our kids to fight. That's not a countermeasure that we want to use. We don't teach elementary kids the swarm technique, as Deputy Vogel said, where they would swarm the person, take them down, and secure the threat. We would teach them, though, to run, yell, and to throw things. We would teach the swarm technique in the middle school and a high school setting with kids that would be able to have the physical ability to do those things. The next step in Alice would be to evacuate. And this would be a case where if the active shooter was in the commons or in another area of the building, the rest of the building would evacuate and get to a safe area. A lot of questions that I've had is once they leave the building, then we don't have accountability for them. Where do they go? And that's where we would get the community involved. We would have to establish rally points, areas where kids can go. In my case at Olentangy High School, Kroger's, there's a Methodist Church on Lewis Center. We would have them aware of that they're a rally point, get them involved. Any community involvement obviously is going to be helpful with these types of situations. And the community in general would need to work together to establish these kind of countermeasures and evacuating, because we would have potentially mass chaos. We would have students running. We would have students trying to get to a safe area, so we would make everybody aware. This is actually a preferred plan for the Department of Homeland Security and for the NYPD. They also recommend the Alice training. And with that, I will give it back to Deputy Martin, Sheriff Martin.
I'm going to introduce Steve Hedge, and then we'll be available, obviously, as the forum goes on to answer any questions. We know full well that you have to collaborate in today's society to be successful in prevention and intervention, and I've had the opportunity to work with Steve Hedge over the last several years on a lot of initiatives throughout the community, both at the city level and now at the county level. So Steve's going to address you folks on the issue of the aspect of mental health component in this. Steve?
Thank you, Sheriff. It's not always I get introduced by a sheriff. That's usually one on my bucket list, you know, make sure I get introduced. But I don't know, I may need some help getting the slides up. I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. But again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a chance for us to talk about some of the other aspects that you've not heard about today, whether it's safety or law enforcement and so forth. That's the mental health aspect of it. As been mentioned several times, this is not any one system trying to address this issue, but it's a number of, yeah, I've got the clicker, thank you very much. And we know that we're a part of this discussion because we're talking about many instances where a person may have mental illness, some may not. Unfortunately, with the various shootings that have recently happened, there's been a lot of recent national spotlight about mental illness, what it is, what it isn't, and how that intertwines with some of the aspects. And I put up here just some of the common themes, and obviously this is still untold in a lot of areas as far as the shootings and so forth, the tragedies, but there are some things that I want to point out. Obviously there's guns involved in the shootings, white males, young folks, a lot of these happen to be loners, folks that really had, if you really peel back what was going on in their lives, they were socially isolated, they didn't have any friends, and they had mental health issues. Some of them obviously committed suicide, so we don't know directly, but we deduce from some of the actions before the tragedies that they did have a mental illness issue. Sometimes untreated, undiagnosed, but we think that's some of the underlying issues. And obviously we know that there are folks that do get bullied and trauma aspects which do lead into some of your mental health issues and some of the tragedies that have occurred. There are a lot of also public policy issues that are associated with some of the things that have gone on recently. You hear a lot about background checks. Who can own a gun, who can't. We have a situation in Ohio where a court can commit someone with mental illness to a certain facility, an oversight by the courts. There's what we call duty to protect. Us in the profession, as a professional, is that we have the duty to inform law enforcement or the authorities if we are counseling someone that it indicates that they may harm someone else or themselves. So that is within our ethics, and that is a strong professional aspect that we deal with, that we do want to make sure that law enforcement is aware. You hear a lot about HIPAA, and that's protecting your health information, so no one else knows about that except you and your health care professional. But in the situation where there is harm involved, that can be broken and given to law enforcement. So again, I think it's important for people to understand that there are things in place, and obviously they don't always work, but there are things in place that can help protect. We also know that there's a lack of resources in our field. There have been recent federal and state cuts, which obviously translates into not as many services and things that we feel should be in place, but obviously it's the reality we live with. And I think that's, again, what Sheriff Martin has said, that we understand that, particularly in my field, these are public dollars that are expended, and we want to expend them wisely and have to make some tough choices on where we should put those resources. Also, you hear recently about some of the expansion in Medicaid. This would cover more people with insurance. Again, those are folks that do not have any resource or health insurance, which we think is a good thing, that will allow people to get the care that they need. And also, on a personal note, we would invite each one of you to know what's in your insurance product. We continue to push to make sure that people have coverage for these illnesses, so they will seek treatment. Without a doubt, youth are exposed to a lot of violence and trauma. Like the other presenters, I'm also a father of 3 sons. They're adult sons now, but I remember the days when I'd like to put a bubble around my boys and protect them from everything around the side of it. That isn't possible, we know that. They're exposed to bullying and cyberbullying. The video games, which again wasn't so much prevalent when I was growing up with my boys, but that's everywhere. Internet, which is an access, is a great thing, but also can be leading to things that you may not, as parents or grandparents, want them to see. News, TV programs, movies, there's a lot of violence in those. If you just think about when you go to movies, a lot of them are supposed to be entertainment, but you really look behind the scenes, there's a lot of violence in those programs. Bomb threats and terrorist threats. from time to time, that even affects this school district, where there may be a situation where you go through the drills and so forth, but it's a reality we deal with on a day-to-day basis. No question, domestic violence, assaults and so forth, that is real. Delaware County is not immune from that. Obviously, families, we're all human beings, that those can affect all of us, and our youth do observe those. One statistic I did want to raise about that I recently read about 22% of youth between the ages of 14 and 17 will witness a shooting at that age. 22%. Now, it may not be that high in Delaware County, but you can imagine if you witness that. And the other side of it is they tend to be more prone to being violent themselves. So if you witness something, you tend to mimic that and use that in the future. Also, natural disasters. We don't always think them as being violent, but obviously trauma is associated with that. Just think if you were on the Jersey Shore a year ago, with the hurricane going through, how that would affect your life and the trauma. Suicides are prevalent. There's more people commit suicide than get shot and killed with guns. Teens is a high rate of suicide because of the things they're going through in their life. In Delaware County, actually in the last several years, we've had more older middle-age, I guess if that's a terminology to use, that do commit suicide. And it's by guns. That obviously males are more used to having and using guns, so that is prevalent. And also veterans. There's no question with those who have done tours in the war zones, that is a major, major source of activity for them. And obviously drug overdoses, which is a part of our whole system of dealing with people that are dealing with opiates, heroin, painkillers. And another statistic that there are more people die of overdoses in Ohio than are killed by auto accidents. So just think about that. We used to think auto accidents was a major killer. Overdoses of opiates is taking its place. Give you a few facts about mental illness, and I think it's important to understand that it is an illness. The brain is a part of our body. Obviously, I kind of think of it as the computer, kind of the mainframe. It regulates what we do, our actions, our emotions, everything in our body. So it has to be recognized as that. And 1 in 4 of us in our lifetime will experience a mental health issue. That's pretty pervasive when you think about it, 1 in 4. It's also interesting, though, because we're obviously talking to an audience about school-age children, that 75% of those that do develop a severe mental illness, it starts between the ages of 16 and 24. So that's and you can just imagine, that's the development of your body and your brain being a part of your body. That's why you see that's the onset of a lot of the illnesses, but also it's on the downside of it is most kids and parents may not recognize that as being the onset of that illness. Good news is it's treatable. We've come a long way in treating mental illness. Medications have done a tremendous job of reducing symptoms, people living normal lives. They do work. Therapy we have more targeted therapy depending on what the condition of a person, so those are all good things. The other thing you have to understand, even though a lot of these cases get the headlines, that a person with mental illness is no more prone to violence than anyone else, with the exception of if it's untreated or they're abusing drugs or alcohol. That puts them 4 to 5 times more in the category of being violent than if they don't take drugs or untreated. And also, obviously, people that in our field know that people with mental illness tend to be more victims than perpetrators. I must mention a little bit about stigma, because there's some still that view this as not an illness. As I said, it's a medical condition, disease of the brain potentially. So people are afraid to tell others. I never see anybody walking down the street saying, I have mental illness on my t-shirt. A lot of things on t-shirts, but not about mental illness. You don't see people writing in these bike-a-thons and so forth for mental illness. It's for cancer and diabetes and so forth. So we haven't quite gotten to the point of these other illnesses, but I hope we will in my lifetime. That being said, that's why a lot of people never seek treatment. It is a shame factor. I don't understand it. No one will support me if I'm mentally ill. So again, that's why you see a lot of people never seek treatment for these illnesses. And as I said before, if I were you, I would maybe check my insurance. Hope you never need that kind of insurance, but a lot of insurance products do not have coverage or adequate coverage for mental illness activities. Response to disasters, and just a little bit more from our perspective, obviously the first people on the scene are always going to be law enforcement, EMS. They're your first responders. We have a great first responding process and officers and EMS in Delaware County. I don't know if there's anyone finer in the country than these folks, and I work with these people day in and day out. They are the best. They're well trained, they're well equipped, and they are on it. So I think in that respect, we're blessed to have that. Obviously, you address the safety issues and the basic needs and concerns, and obviously the Sandy Hook process kind of got you that, even though we saw it over and over again many, many times on the news. But obviously, you have to deal with the basic needs. And then you start looking at some of the emotional issues that come out. Obviously, in our field, we look at kind of the support activities and so forth. You don't go into the heavy-duty psychotherapy the day after one of these tragedies. You try to comfort people to make sure they feel safe. The children, make sure they feel safe. They feel loved and so forth. So you start dealing with the effects afterwards, and that really is part of where we come in. It's the aftermath that really is a major, major issue. I had an opportunity to talk to my colleague, or my peer up in Geauga County, which covers Chardon, and it's been over 1 year since that tragedy in Chardon High School. And they have seen over a 20% increase in the need for mental health services, and they also have had 6 kids attempted suicide from that high school. That shows you it wasn't just within the day or week afterward. It's a long-term effect, and some of those kids and parents will be impacted for life. So you understand the traumatic experience that is. Prevention, I think Sheriff Martin put it very well. I wish I could stand up here and said, this will never happen again. I wish I had the 5 or 6 points and said, if you did these, we'd never have anyone with mental illness being involved with any of these shootings. That's just not going to happen. The hope is to kind of reduce the damage, or reduce the chances of that happening, and I hope it never does happen here in Delaware County. But obviously, education is very, very key for all of us to really understand and recognize the signs and symptoms of mental health issues and how and where to seek help. Obviously, family and school involvement and support is critical. We all need nurtured in our lives, whether it's young, older, middle-aged. That is an important part, and having that support and involvement is critical. And again, I give kudos to this school district. You do a tremendous job of the support you provide your students and your parents. That's critical. We talk a lot about in my field about building assets and resiliency in students, interacting with other folks, having friends, involved in activities. And the research shows that if a youth is involved in 2 or more activities a week, they are far less likely to be involved with drugs, alcohol. They're more mentally healthy and physically healthy if they're involved in activities. Developing coping skills. That's not something we're born with. We have to learn and develop skills on how to cope with life situations and to make healthy choices. Again, I use my sons as an example. They didn't always make good choices, but I hope they learned and the consequences from that of having boundaries and so forth. So we need to learn to make those healthy choices. And again, the school district here does an excellent job of working with students to do that. Observation is always very important. Just like the crime watches that you have in your neighborhoods, I wouldn't call it the mental health watch, but there obviously you will notice things in people's behavior. And if you see something out of the ordinary, that's a time to maybe a red flag. Maybe this person needs some help. Maybe they're going in a different direction, even though you may not be a professional field. But this is something that could really impact in that person's life or their family. So that's why we always talk about tell someone. And I think that's what the SROs do. Not just keep it yourself, tell someone. If you see something that's out of the ordinary, tell someone. And feel comfortable doing that. I put up a few things here just to kind of give you, and it's not a complete list, of what you can do as parents, grandparents. Obviously educating yourself about the signs and symptoms, your involvement. I'm not in my head myself. Here we go. Educating yourself, involvement, support, having an open dialogue. And again, using my family's example, we used to have at least two nights a week that we did have a dinner together. There's an opportunity to sit down and talk about the stuff that's going on. I can't tell you times my sons didn't want to be there, but it was good for them to talk about what they were doing in their lives, what was going on in sports, what was going on in school, what was going on with girlfriends, what mom and dad were doing, but it was a chance to dialogue and get an idea of what's going on in their lives. Obviously, as parents and grandparents, we model behavior all the time. So you have to understand that you as parents and grandparents, you are the most influential person in your youth's life more than anyone else. It's not the coach, not the teacher, even though they're important. It is you as parents and grandparents. So I want to continue to reinforce that. Getting to know friends and peers is critical. Changing routines and behaviors. If you see a wide swing in that, then it gives you the red flag, maybe something's going on in that youth's lives. We also tell people it is so easy to be sitting in front of the CNN and the TV hour after hour and seeing that plane crash into the center in New York, see those victims and what they're going through, the terror, over and over again. That's not healthy, not mentally healthy. You need to turn that off. You need to move on. Some other things. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be informed, but you can't be seeing that stuff over and over again and not impact you and your loved ones. Social media is such important, or a thing that youth are involved with. I don't know how many times I walk down a hallway and kids are texting, and obviously they're doing the same thing. They spend sometimes more time on the computer and social media than anything else these days. And adult supervision and monitoring. I don't know how many times, and I know that the sheriff would probably back me up on this. There's too many times when there's a lot of youth together and there isn't at least some adult supervision. That is sometimes a recipe for disaster. There's situations where kids are getting together and they get in trouble, and we don't want that to happen. And again, seeking help early on is really key to being able to address some of these things. Lastly, and I won't go through these because I do have handouts. There's local resources. I mentioned the board that I represent, which is your public agency responsible for the mental health and drug and alcohol services in this county, some of our contract providers, and some national websites. And as I said, I have handouts for that, so I won't go through this now. So at this point, looks like I hand it back over to Tom, who will get into some of the meat and the questions that you have. Again, thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Steve.
We're going to begin with our questions for the members of the panel, and we're going to continue to collect your questions. So if you still have a question, if you would please jot it down. We'll try to get the questions answered yet received. And I'm going to take the first question because it relates to something that I shared with you at the outset. And the question is the money set aside in the governor's budget for safety items available to all districts or only for those who qualify for Ohio School Facilities Commission money? Because obviously Olentangy does not qualify. We don't know yet. We've not had rules developed. The School Facilities Commission will be developing those rules, and we shall see. One of the reasons for the program is the School Facilities Commission operates very strictly from something called a design manual. The design manual was not changed until, for safety purposes, really until after the Columbine killings. And so then there was a major change in terms of what the manual called for with regard to safety. And so buildings that were built before that time do not reflect those changes in the design manual. And so the notion, and plus then we have buildings in this state. I saw some pictures of a school building, still in use by the way. It's 120 years old. If they were going to evacuate, I don't know how they have a fire drill because of how narrow the hallways are. We have districts that actually have schools with fire doors that are closed. Well, maybe that would keep somebody out, but it also keeps all the potential victims in. So, you know, there are a lot of issues in terms of the design and the facilities themselves that are going to be addressed. But the rules have not yet been developed. And the other issue is, of course, $12 million isn't going to go a long way. What they are talking about, however, are increased security at entrances. But one other thing I'll say about schools, and you'll have to forgive me for saying this, it's just that I've been in this business since the earth started to cool. And schools that were built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when we had major school construction going on, they weren't designed for safety. They had multiple entrances, which were normally not even locked. Now we still have all of those doors in the design manual. We keep the doors locked, and the reason, some people have asked me, why do we have so many doors in schools where people can get in? because you have to be able to get out. Okay? You have 700, 800 kids in a building and you have a fire in the building, you need to be able to evacuate. You know, we talk about evacuation as part of practice. We've been practicing evacuation drills in public schools in this state for decades. We just call them fire drills. We've been practicing lockdown for a long time. We call them tornado drills. So again, the rules around whatever structural changes may be made for buildings, they're not developed yet. And one of the reasons they're not developed yet is the budget hasn't been approved yet. And so until the budget is finally approved and the actual dollars are there, I don't think we're going to see rules, but then I expect that to happen very quickly. At least that's the word that we have in our consultation with the staff at the Ohio School Facilities Commission. So thank you for that question. And we'll go on to the next question for our panel. And I'll just let anybody who wants to address this issue. What is the possibility of having a full-time resource officer in every school? I think the mics may work on the table. Try this.
They do.
But
Sheriff, do you...
I think, Mr. Lucas, you and I kind of did some rough math on that.
Yes.
And we're talking, I want to say, how many buildings in your district?
23.
23. So if you do that, given the wages, benefits, and insurance for a single deputy, you know, the reality of it is you're probably in the ballpark of about $75,000. So you do 75,000 times 23, and it's probably verges on cost prohibitive. But again, at the local level, if the voters want to support that, I suppose that's something that could be entertained. But I just, as a taxpayer, I have a feeling that's probably very difficult to swallow.
That's roughly $1 million, by the way. I did the math here. And obviously, I would agree with the sheriff. One thing we are doing, though, and I think Gail already alluded to this, is the fact that we're working to expand that piece with the potential of 2 other resource officers. Now, you know, again, I hope I'm not premature in saying that, but that's been the conversation. And we also know that the majority of time, and I think the resource officers can attest to this, would be spent in our middle schools and high schools. Not to say that, you know, things that take place in an elementary, but that's where the majority. So I think eventually a very realistic goal would be to go from 3 to 5 and then see how that works at the middle school level, and then potentially go from, you know, 5 to 8. That would be one in every middle school. Now that would be a realistic goal.
One of the questions I think that we have heard from several sources since the Newtown killings, it has to do with the possibility of having designated armed personnel in each building. We have heard that in terms of volunteers who might be trained, as well as school personnel themselves who might have a concealed carry permit. Be interested in the reaction of any of the panelists in terms of your thoughts on having designated armed personnel in each building.
Well, I'll speak on behalf of law enforcement. You know, as I indicated from the podium, I think this is a decision that needs to be made at the local level. There are a lot of CCW permit holders in this county. We're processing over 1,000 a year. That's increased recently with some of the items that have occurred on national level. I'll tell you, as a law enforcement executive, there are a lot of responsible gun owners out there. It is a privilege and a right that comes with being a United States citizen. I think whatever the local community wants to do, it's critical that your local law enforcement partner needs to be involved in the training aspect of that. One of the things I shared just recently at the Buckeye School Administrators meeting down in Columbus was that I've been in this profession for 32 years. I've seen coworkers, trained professional law enforcement officers, accidentally discharge weapons on at least 7 different occasions in the workplace and in a parking lot. That's a reality. When you're handling weapons and you're doing that, those things happen, even among the military and your most trained. I've seen police officers leave their firearm behind in a bathroom. I'm not proud of that. That happens. That's a reality when you start carrying that tool. So those are some things that need to be, not just one aspect of things that need to be considered as you discuss having civilians who are armed, and I'm not opposed to that, but we just need to talk about it, have dialogue. They need to be trained, as I did share a forum over in Sunbury a couple weeks ago, because some of the audience was advocating strongly for arming people in the schools, and I said I'm not opposed to that. I said, but if you discount partnering with your local law enforcement, if it ever hits the fan and we show up and we've not trained, we don't know who's identified as the armed staff members or volunteers, in the midst of chaos, we're not going to take the time to ask people if you're supposed to have a gun. So my first sentiment is, I think these guys are the most qualified, they're the most professional, it's the best armed solution. But if the local community determines we want to arm civilians, my appeal is we'll work with you on that, but we ought to be on the same page in training together. That's my perspective.
Gail, do you want to address that piece any I know from your end?
No, I mean, I think I would share Sheriff Martin's sentiments that that's a decision that needs to be made on the local level. I don't know if there's much more to add to that.
I would also add that any and all suggestions we are looking at, and just because we're looking at them, that doesn't mean we're going to do them. But I think there are several options involved. But I would also echo what Sheriff Martin said. Anything that we do will be in collaboration with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department, and also, you know, the POW and Genoa Township, who provide that type of law enforcement for us. But nothing is off the table.
Next few questions had to do with ALICE training, and I'll just kind of group those together then, and we'll tackle them one at a time. First of all, how much does the ALICE training cost? We assume that there's a cost associated with it, and when might it be going into effect?
Well, I believe the Sheriff's Office paid around $400 for each SRO to be trained. And, you know, after our training, basically, to the school district, to our community, it's basically minimal cost. It's just a matter of getting people certified to instruct ALICE. I think it was mentioned that this is a community project. I would like to even see some of our community members, some parents, be trained in it as well.
So really the cost of the training was to prepare the resource officers to be trainers themselves so they could provide the training then for staff.
Correct.
I also think that it is possible, as we go down this road in this collaboration with the Sheriff's Office, that we may have several administrators that also may be trained, and then that will give us a larger pool of trainers to bring that training to the staff. So I think that's something that we're exploring currently.
But the Sheriff's Office has no intent of charging our school districts for our deputies coming in and providing training.
And Tom, I might add, just to give you some idea of a timeline, and Gail already mentioned the fact that on May 7th we're training our administrators, but I would hope by next school year we would be working through that training and have that completed as we work through the school year.
What about a timeline in terms of, I think the presentation talked about training students, different levels of ALICE based on the age of the children. Is there some thought about when and how those students might be trained then in ALICE?
And those details really honestly haven't been worked out at this point. The SROs have been trained recently, and those are ongoing discussions, but I agree with Dr. Lucas that my hope would be that the training both for staff and to be in place and implemented by the end of next school year.
And just thinking out loud, you know, it's one thing training adults. It's a total another thing training students. Because as we all know, and we have kids in the system, you have to answer that question, okay, where are you in regard to this training of a student? So I would think, you know, just going through a process, that type of training would begin with some type of a survey of the adults saying, okay, we're going to be providing this type of training for your son or daughter. Are you interested? To get some idea of how many students, or how many parents, I should say, actually would want their student trained.
And of course, part of the challenge of all of that is to perform the training without, undoubtedly it is going to be unsettling. And trying to do it in the least unsettling way, I think, becomes important. I can remember when, in the past, for example, when we were teaching children not to accept rides from strangers, not to accept gifts from strangers, there were children who were unsettled by that as well. And so there has to be a consistent way to do it. Question, is there a consistent safety plan across the entire district? And if so, where is this posted for parents to read?
I can take that one. Yes, we absolutely have a consistent safety plan across the district, but I would say that each individual building also has a safety plan, and that safety plan is unique to the building layout of that building. The school safety plan is not shared in its entirety with the public, and that's for a reason. Again, we don't want to share the safety measures that we would take in the event that we do have an active shooter, because heaven help us, we don't want that information in the hands of someone that could use it against us. So the school safety plan, the details of that, of how we would react in some of the situations we discussed, that's certainly not public, and it's not public for a reason.
It's also interesting, when the legislation a few years ago was passed that actually created the obligation for a school safety plan, one of the early requirements in the early stages of the legislation was to file a blueprint of the building. And there are issues with that, because then for those people who are actually skilled in something other than shootings, like bombings, you're actually giving them a working diagram of the HVAC systems throughout the building, for example. So that was changed then so that those did not have to become public knowledge. Again, if you have a question, I have several more here, but if you have a question and have not yet completed your card, just hold up your hand if you need a card, or if you have completed another question, please hold your hand up so that our friends from the Rotary Club then can gather your card.
Can I add one more comment just briefly? We've got representatives from Navigate here tonight, and talking about the school safety plans, I believe that the district has entered into a contract at this point with them. Correct. And we're going to be partnering to make more field available, as Mr. Marsh talked about earlier, for our first responders and our dispatch centers. They can pull up those floor plans. A lot of other information can be added to that, which can help the first responders. So maybe it doesn't answer the parent's question that wants to see the plan, but your local law enforcement community is working with the district on an application we think that'll improve first response.
Next question has to do with mental illness. It addresses the issue of whether teachers and administrators are trained to recognize a student with a mental illness, what kind of training might be anticipated, and what can staff do about it if they feel that they have made that recognition of a mental illness in a student.
Good questions. I think as a combination of things, I don't know how much training teachers get in the mental health issues, but they can obviously be observations of what out of the ordinary type activities. And again, your school district has counselors, they have social workers that can also work with that student and that parent and teacher. We also, and I forgot to mention in my remarks, we also have dedicated mental health school liaisons, which these are professionals in our field that do connect with the schools. They're assigned to Olentangy schools to work with them if there's an instance of there's any question about what is needed for that youth or situation that is discussed. And then they're referred into the system, whether it's a private provider or some within the public system. So it's a combination of if the teacher can recognize there's something going on within that child's life, maybe they're not learning, maybe they're isolated. Obviously, kids bring things from home that is a tragic situation. So if the teacher can recognize that, then they have things to hand it off. They have a lot of support within the district, whether it's the social worker, the counselor, school counselors, or the mental health liaison person. So I think it's a combination of those. So there's always active people within the districts that are willing to work with the student and that teacher.
Okay, addressing the issue of securing front entrances of buildings. Obviously, with the Newtown killings, there were some safety precautions that were available that were ineffective. Specifically, the question relates to glass in the front doors that could be shot through, as happened in Newtown. And beyond that, then, how would front office staff stop an intruder at that point? Anyone care to weigh in on that one?
Well, I know in our Alice training that we had, we kind of realized that if somebody wants to get in the building bad enough, they're going to find a way in, whether it be a door, whether it be a window, whether any kind of access point. If they try hard enough, unfortunately, they're probably going to get in the building. And I know in that question, you're specifically talking about the front entrance. I know we've talked about, and a lot of the schools, I know Hyatt's, Shanahan, Berkshire, some of those schools have, their front entrance immediately has you directed into the main office, which is a good, in my opinion, a good safety precaution, rather than having that person then have immediate access to the school. They would have to go through the front office first and then gain access. So there are things that can be done as far as prevention, or at least to slow that person down, but I think, in my opinion, to completely stop somebody from getting in a building, because we talked about metal detectors, more cameras, trying to make the building more safe. Those are all things that can be proactive, but actually stopping somebody who has a mindset of going in and taking lives, I don't think it's actually going to stop somebody.
A related question to that I think you just touched on, and that was, how do you prevent concealed weapons from coming into the schools, particularly in the upper grades? I think we're alluding to metal detectors.
Well, and again, I just had a discussion with one of the deputies. They said, well, metal detectors will stop somebody from carrying a gun into a building. And my immediate argument was that, again, that might be a deterrent for a regular citizen who says, oh, there's a metal detector, I can't carry my gun or any weapons in this building. My first thought comes to the courthouse. But again, somebody coming in that front door shooting isn't going. The metal detector is not going to stop them from what they have in mind and what their goal is.
I have a softball question for you, Sheriff. What was the name of the books that you mentioned?
I don't want to strike out on a softball, do I? The author is Gavin DeBecker. The author is Gavin DeBecker. I don't think there's anybody better in the field of threat assessment, and he has written extensively on this. Two very easy books to read, very practical, are, as I mentioned before. One is The Gift of Fear. The other is Protecting the Gift. And I just, whenever I speak in a forum like this on personal safety, I always mention those books. I just think they're required reading for personal safety.
How would parents be notified if there was a situation at one of our schools?
I think Typically, that's going to become, depending on what the situation is, that information is going to come directly from the building principal. They work very closely with our communications department, but we try very hard to let our parents know what's happening in our building with regard to safety and with regard to other events that are going on in the building that are out of the ordinary. Certainly we can always do better, but I know as a former building principal, that was always my goal, to keep parents informed of what's happening in the building, whether that be good things happening or things that we can do better.
I would add to that, Tom, that at times technology becomes our enemy in that regard, because as we all know, anytime there's a threat, whether it be, we've had bomb threats, oftentimes students will beat us to the punch with the texting. And so we've done a variety of things, as Gail said, whether that be, we have the caller system, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have, listserv, and we continue to look for ways, but sometimes when things happen, with the amount of technology that we have, both adults and students, they sometimes beat us to the punch, and sometimes that creates chaos, because parents get a text, they rush to the school, and all of a sudden we have law enforcement trying to get in, or whatever that may be, and you have adults there trying to pick their kids up. So that can be a challenge, and will continue to be a challenge, but we are always looking for the latest and greatest in regard to technology, for all intents and purposes, to beat our kids to the punch.
One other thing, just to build upon the statistics, some facts that were given to you earlier. In the Ohio Attorney General's task force, it was revealed at the meeting last week that of all of these shootings that we're discussing, and I'm going to include now the Colorado movie theater shootings, in the vast majority of the cases, and I think the figure was 75% of the cases, at least one person knew that the perpetrator was going to do it and never shared that with appropriate authorities. We need to be able to listen to each other and to our children. Yeah. This is related, but it's not exactly identical. The question is, what can be done to separate the foot traffic and the car bus traffic at Olentangy High? Current procedures, this particular person indicates that this is an accident waiting to happen.
That certainly, Olentangy High School,
yes.
Certainly the layout of that building is a challenge, both because I've been there at dismissal time, and it's certainly the challenge. It's something that we'll continue to work on to improve. I don't have a solution at hand, but we'll certainly look at that and try to improve, because we certainly don't want accidents with cars and students or cars and adults.
And that's actually the high school that I'm assigned to, and I know this year we changed where the buses all come to one bus circle, as last year they had buses coming to two different exits, so that was a big help. Whenever I'm available, I also go out to the parking lot after school and direct the buses out. I know they have a security guard that's present at the four-way stop that helps move traffic, and I agree, there's a lot of foot traffic crossing the road going over into the junior and sophomore lot. There's also a lot of foot traffic going out into the senior lot as well. They already did prohibit students from parking in another separate lot by the high school by the football field because of foot traffic crossing there. They really didn't have anybody to supervise that. I know that they're doing the best that they can. They've already discussed maybe adding another security guard to help with traffic as well.
Okay. Next question has to do with, I suppose, in lieu of school resource officer, armed guards in the school. Was the district too quick to dismiss the idea of armed guards? Was it because of cost? How would that impact the total school district budget for this year, for example?
Well, I know that the topic of armed guards, I believe, came up immediately after Newtown, and the cost, I had that cost at one time to put armed guards in every school building in America, and it was in the billions of dollars. I think that again, as a local decision, whether you want resource officers, whether you want armed guards, the decision has to come down to, this all comes with a cost. And where is the break-even point? And by all means, I'm not saying none of this is important, but there does come a break-even point where you say, okay, can we make you safe 24/7, 365? I think the answer is no. I do believe there's continued talk of armed guards at the federal level, but I'm not sure how far that's going to go. That's good conversation. Sheriff, do you have anything to add?
Well, you know, I had the good fortune to visit France this year. It was my first trip to that country with my family, and we saw armed police all around the Eiffel Tower, armed military. And not to be an alarmist, because I refuse to operate from that platform as a law enforcement executive, but I will tell you that what I'm about to share with you, I know has been discussed in some cave in Afghanistan or Pakistan, that 5 committed terrorists with small arms were to strike 5 elementary schools on the same day in this country in different regions, would have a crippling effect in this nation. Within 24 hours, it would not be a local discussion. I suspect that the response would be the National Guard and military deployed in our local schools. I think that's a real possibility. I'm also not, you know, as a taxpayer and as a law enforcement executive, you know, we've moved into a different paradigm where there is merit to armed security. They're less expensive. I understand that. It's something I've seen in a trend. We see this across the board when you're talking about public dollars and stretching public dollars. Again, I will tell you, you kind of get what you pay for. And if the local community wanted to allocate X amount of dollars for private security, again, I would say that needs to be a determination as best you can from your constituents and in partnership with your local law enforcement, so that if we've got X amount of school resource officers and X amount of private security, they're working together. And I will tell you that with law enforcement officers, you do get a different, you should get a different degree of training, and you should get a different response on a lot of issues. But having said that, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you there's no room for private security. And let me add this too, not to get off track too much, but one of the things that DeBecker talks about is who best to protect our own than families and parents. And I'll be so radical to throw out, you know, there's a lot of Columbus police officers that have students in the Olentangy School District. And they're walking into your schools every day carrying concealed as they drop their kids off for their visit. If we wanted to entertain discussions where volunteers would watch certain parts of the building at certain times of the day, again, I think that's a discussion that should be had at the local level, and once again, perhaps with the oversight of your local law enforcement, helping monitor who your volunteers are, making sure there's some level of training, and then your constituents being comfortable with what you folks decide. Does that make sense?
Dr. Lee, is there a question there about the total current operating budget for Olentangy for this year?
$160 million.
$160 million. Okay, thank you. And there was a question about the cost of the armed guards, but I think what the reference to the $1 million before had to do with school resource officers, not armed guards in those buildings.
I see, yeah.
This is a question from a parent of an elementary school child. What are the steps that should be taken as a parent to promote a full-time presence of SROs? Doesn't say full-time placement, but full-time presence of SROs at the elementary schools and the middle school.
Again, I think Sheriff Martin can address this, but again, I think it's kind of that question goes back to something we talked about earlier. I don't think at this point, anyway, that it's potentially cost prohibitive to have an SRO in every school building. Now, I think Dr. Lucas talked about moving in a direction to increase, but I'm not sure that we're at a point where we can financially are able to put an SRO in every building.
One of the things I implemented as Chief of Police for the City of Delaware was a program with the acronym PRESS, and it was Police Resources Enhancing School Safety. And we assigned road officers to a specific building, and we had a police officer assigned to every building in the City of Delaware. Now granted, we're talking 10 buildings as opposed to in this county, I think we've got 32 or 34, and I don't think that includes private and parochial schools and some of the other. But it's possible to have officers assigned to schools, and as their duties allow, this is what we did in the city, they'll stop by, check in with the administration, walk the hallways, interact with the students. But I'll also tell you that right now, with the number of buildings in this county, I wouldn't have enough deputies to do that. But it's something that we could begin to explore.
Well, and I will add to that a couple things at the risk of offending anyone. I think you've heard the term local decisions, and these next few statements would be preaching to the choir. You are here tonight because obviously you are concerned and you have some issues. Had we had this community forum the day after Newtown, the community, this theater would probably be full. And I think I made that statement to several people. One day after, we're outraged. 1 week after, we're upset. 1 month after, we're getting back to normal. 1 year after, unfortunately, something bad has to happen again to kind of jog our memory because we have short memories. This is your school system. And when the question becomes, what do we have to do, it would be the same as any initiative of a local school system or local decision, is the fact that if enough people rally around and feel it's vitally important, then those specific concerns are going to be pushed through. So I would say to you at all times, I've seen initiatives go forth and get funded, and I've seen initiatives just fall off because of the interest. And I'll keep coming back to this, local decision. I've told many in coffee chats that I have the keys to the kingdom until I hand it over to the next person. And we'll all come and go, but 20 years from now, the Olentangy schools will still be here, and that gets back to local decisions. What's important? What would you like to see in your school system? And so the start of that process is to bring forth the concerns.
This question then goes back to the budget and the $1 million for school resource officers. Are you saying then that that's something that the school district cannot do at this point in time?
I'm saying from the school system standpoint that, and I think the sheriff kind of addressed this, was the fact of in any resources that you put forth, you have to measure, does the end justify the means? Actually, from the specific math, it's about $1.7 million is what the cost would be, and that would come down to a collaborative effort between the county and the school. And I by no means I am not saying that it's not important enough to put forth $1.7 million. I am saying that in relationship with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department and Powell and Genoa Township is the fact of, do we feel that we're safe now, and what means do we need to go forward to make decisions to put additional security in the schools? Right now, we have not arrived at the decision to put officers in every school building. Right. Does that mean we will never do that? Absolutely not. But right now, we feel that we're safe. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely.
I think also if we're talking about that as a matter of public policy, we have to remember that the public also includes constituencies that are larger than the Olentangy local school district. And the question has to be asked, at what point does either the state or the federal government have some obligation if it is a matter of good public policy?
Right.
Just for our school resource officers, one of our members of the audience wants some idea about your schedule in terms of, like going to either the middle school or the elementary schools. Are you able to do that on a weekly basis, or how many times a month are you able to do that? Just some flavor for what life is like for a school resource officer and your schedule.
Well, I just want to, comment, with the resources that we have, we're doing the best we can. I know the school district, the sheriff encourages the school resource officers to get out there to the elementary schools to do safety classes and all that so the kids can get comfortable with us. Okay, I like to start the year going into kindergarten. Because, kindergartner coming in, you can look at me and it looks a little intimidating with all the equipment that's on my duty belt and all that. So, the teacher will invite me in and, I'll talk to the kids and, by the end of the class, I'm a rock star. The kids just, they're there, they want to give you a hug, and that's what it's all about. We want our kids to feel comfortable with us, that they can come to us if they need help. And my schedule, with the amount of schools I have, and I love it because I love the high school kids a certain way, and, the middle school kids are unique, so I get the full spectrum as a school resource officer, okay? And, usually I try to make it a point to, hit every school at least once a week, okay? I think Dr. Lucas had mentioned that most of my time in a week is going to be spent at the high school. I mean, we have 1,700 kids at Liberty High School and growing. I mean, this is like a small little city when you think about it. I mean, 1,700 kids and growing. So most of my time is here, but it is encouraged by the sheriff and, the Olentangy local schools for me to get out to the elementaries and middle schools to establish that important rapport with the kids.
And my day pretty much is going to mirror what Deputy Vogel said. I also enjoy going to the elementary schools, and for those of you that don't know, we teach bus safety, we teach stranger safety, poison safety. We do a friendly sheriff. We go in and just introduce ourselves and get to know the kids and let them know that we are the good guys, and that if they ever need anything that they can come to us and to not be afraid. The issues get a little bit more serious as you go into the middle schools and high schools, so a lot of times that does pull more of our time in dealing with things like that, but we still try to be proactive. Same thing with the middle schools and high schools. We do internet safety, we do cyberbullying safety, we talk about drugs and alcohol, and again, we try to deal with all those things from a proactive standpoint and try to educate the students on the importance of making good choices and trying to be a positive role model for them in the schools as well.
I have one last question here this evening, and Sheriff Martin, I guess it's addressed to you. It is, what about retired police officers serving as armed guards? Would you support that program?
I think I've indicated throughout the evening the door is wide open. I think I would be irresponsible, and I don't probably share perhaps the same opinion with all my colleagues in this profession. I think there are some probably irresponsible law enforcement executives that find a time for crisis for a time for growth. And I think it's a time to problem solve. There are a lot of retired police officers that, if they were monitored, trained, we maintain some kind of partnership with the schools. The board would have to pass, I believe the statute requires that the board would have to pass, not an ordinance, but you would have to pass the authority for them to carry on the school. Right. So, I mean, again, that's going to have to be a partnership, but, we would want to be careful in, making sure that the people that we are authorizing to carry in the schools, that there's been some type of background check, we're comfortable with them, there's a modicum of training with your local law enforcement partner, but I'd be willing to entertain any of those discussions.
I believe that the statement was made earlier that the average response time nationwide for first responder is somewhere in the 6-minute range, somewhere around there. One of our members of the audience wants to have some sense of what is the approximate estimated response time in terms of Delaware County going to one of the Olentangy local schools.
Well, I think that the concern is we have 3 dedicated school resource officers, but if any school administrator or staff member gets on the phone and calls 911, our guys are rolling code 3 as fast as they can. You folks know the traffic patterns in this county. I'd like to tell you I've got 30 deputies out there a shift. I don't have. We might have 8 to 10 deputies on shift. So I think that national average is not unreasonable. It could be 3 to 6 minutes before we arrive. And, unfortunately, that's a lot of time, which goes back to, I think, the discussion in introducing Alice, because what we're talking about is taking some responsibility for our own safety. We're talking about hardening the target. We're talking about not being sitting ducks, for lack of better terms, and applying what we think are some best practices to make people safer. And let me leave with this too. I've used this term warrior teacher in a couple of settings. And I mentioned earlier I'm married to a school teacher. I think she's here in the audience tonight. Most teachers are hired. They're nurturers, right? They're here because they love students. They care about what they do. But I'm telling you, there are some people out there that have that warrior mindset. And I talked about the teacher who sacrificed her life there in Connecticut when she told the assailant her students were elsewhere, and I understand that she was hiding or concealing them, and he shot her in cold blood and moved on, but she sacrificed her life as a warrior to save X amount of students. And I think that, as I shared with the staff several weeks ago, we probably need to change the way we think a little bit. And if something happens in our school or we're uncomfortable, and I shared this, we talked about, and that's why I don't think the audience is larger tonight, we get this kind of vigilance fatigue over the course of time. But we owe it to ourselves. If you see somebody in the hallway, if somebody approaches the door, and as I said before, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And if something makes you uncomfortable, it needs to be confronted. And that would begin with the staff in beginning to harden that target. So.
One question this is just not the proper venue for it. It has to do with the school board member's opinion for armed guards. I think that's more appropriately left for a school board meeting, since we did not ask them in advance to participate, and since all are not in attendance this evening, 4 of your 5 board members are here.
Well, and I don't want anyone to think that conversation hasn't taken place, along with all school safety issue. That's definitely a conversation. We had a work session, in fact, where Sheriff Martin came to the work session, talked about school safety to our school board members. So the conversation does take place and will continue to take place, and I think it's evolving at all times. I hope the word you hear the most tonight is the word collaboration, and the fact that we have experts in our county and that we are working hand in hand with those experts to make sure everyone is safe.
I think that probably this question, I'm going to change it a little bit with a show of hands. How many of you approve of the school resource officer program? Put your hands up if you do. Of course, then the question that would come after that is supporting additional resources then to make that happen, which is actually what the question was. With that said this evening, first of all, I want to just share one other thing that I have been told about the Columbine incident, and that is at the time of the shootings, the killings, there was an armed law enforcement officer on the campus, but he was in another section of a very, very large building, and everything happens very quickly. Plus, law enforcement has actually, in my opinion, altered its approach to those incidents. It used to be that if you had somebody in the building, the natural thing to do was to secure the perimeter of the building. I believe that was what used to happen. Secure the perimeter so the person does not get away. And now I believe that with such things as Alice training, with school resource officers, the notion is it may just be that you can't wait for backup. And so appreciate that and just wanted to share that statistic with you. I think you should all, in the audience this evening, take a great deal of pride in the fact that the school district held this community forum. There are a lot of school districts in this state tonight where this discussion should be happening, and it's not. And so the fact that you're being proactive and leading to probably what will undoubtedly be additional discussion over the coming months, I would just encourage you, and Dr. Lucas I know has already said this and is very aware of it, we can't wait for an incident in order to take action. And so I would encourage you then to continue your work, the fine work you're doing with your school security plans, the involvement then of your school resource officers, your sheriff's department, the promotion of the ALICE training. I think all of those things are very positive things that, quite frankly, are not happening in a lot of school districts tonight in this state. So again, I commend you and the sheriff and his staff and the Olentangy local schools for being willing to tackle this topic. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your attendance here this evening. Thank you again, and we are adjourned.